Well, we've come to that time of the show. I love this on a Friday. You know, our last half hour, let's just have a bit of fun, right? That is why we've got the Friday Fun Forum. Special guests join me every week at this time to discuss some of the biggest stories, some of the lighter stories of the week. And I'm rapt to have first time on the show, hopefully not the last, award-winning journalist, health advocate, Rachel Smalley. Rach.
Hi, Leah. How you doing?
I always live for this moment because this is a time too when I can enjoy a little sip of wine, you know, my last half hour.
Yeah.
So I'm having a nice little Spy Valley Pinot Noir. But anyway, we've got oh no, because I'm not driving anywhere. I've got my studio at home. Yeah. Let's jump in, Rach. We've got, you know, there's been some big stories this week. We let's start with the report that was tabled in Parliament on Wednesday. This was, 6 years in the making of the abuse and care, state care, and it was. I'm sure you would have watched it, on Parliament TV. Yeah. The numbers are huge: 200,000 physically, sexually abused. I mean, where do you want to start, Rachel? I mean, redress, the apologies. What do you make?
It's been horrific, right? It's just. I at times have been moved to tears. I mean, the suffering and what people have endured is just, it's not until you see it written down or you see what's in part of that report. And the report obviously is massive. I haven't got through it all. But it's just horrific. I think the whole time, though, that I'm reading some of what happened, what happened at Lake Alice, for example, what were there? 360 children went through there in a 6-year period, and who didn't have a mental illness. I mean, quite apart from the fact the treatment there was horrific, but who didn't have a mental illness. And I think what stands out to me in all of this always is, where was just one person who stood up and said, this is wrong, I can't stand by and watch this. Why did that happen? Although, to be fair to some of those in Lake Alice, they did try and communicate, and the system wasn't prepared to listen to them. But in all of these cases, and we see it now with some of our horror stories around child abuse now, that we've got families that close up, or people that close up, or communities that close up, and they won't give police information. I don't know why we don't protect children. I just don't understand what stops us.
It's incredible, because I had Karen Shaw actually in the studio at the beginning of the show today, and we spoke about that because she had a very impassioned speech, and we went on to the military style academies, which I'll get your thoughts as well. But she spoke about, she called them enablers, and she said the perpetrators knew that back then society was kind of engineered not to say anything. We didn't say anything back then, but she said, if you hear something, you have to say something. And she was talking about babies as well, exactly what you're talking about. And she held enablers just as bad as the perpetrators. They have to, they got away with it because nobody was saying anything.
Yeah.
Or listening to these people. Which was
now
just
that we
heartbreaking.
Understand, absolutely, and now that we understand the size of this issue, you talked about redress, and Chris Hipkins has come out and said, look, they're going to work across the House on this. It has to happen. It's going to go across multiple different governments. It will continue for years. The scale of which, though, will be enormous. I don't even know where they would start. I mean, they said neither do they, to be fair. There's an enormous amount of work. Like, how do you compensate? If you look at some of the people, the survivors in Australia, I mean, some of those people receive literally millions. Yes. It will cost billions. And ACC, is that in any way, capable of trying to address some of these issues? It is just extraordinary. It is monumental in its size.
I think
important, as Luxon says.
Yeah. Erica Stanford, I think, said yesterday, or was it, could have been Wednesday night, but I think yesterday that Lake Alice was going to be, survivors of Lake Alice, not preferential, but it was one of those institutions they were going to look at redress quite quickly. But like you said, where do you start? One of the biggest rounds of applause was given to Chloe Swarbrick when she, at the end of her speech, said that they do not want to see these, they call them boot camps. Now, I brought this up, obviously, with Karen Shaw today about they call them the military-style academies. And it starts on Monday, 10 young men for 3 months, and then after that they get 9 months of wraparound services and mentors and the like. Now I've talked in length with her about this quite a few times. I can see that this is not your so-called boot camps of the past. They have worked with iwi, they've worked with holistic entities. They have worked with educators. This is a rounded, not only just discipline having to be in there and treated like a military, but they will get schooling. They get assessed at the beginning to see what issues they have, whether they've got mental health, ADHD, whatever these children, these young men will have. I think personally, I think they're being harshly treated for this. I think we've got to see how it goes. But Rachel, you could have a completely different thought.
No, I have a really interesting view on this. So I grew up right next to Burnham Military Camp, and I went to a military camp school. My parents had a small holding in Canterbury, and so my whole childhood was in and around military, and in and around. We had, military PT instructors. They were extraordinary. We had, we had one of the best athletic squads in Canterbury. We had a fantastic swim squad. And I really understood the structure and what occurred with the military back then. So we had the 2nd 1st Battalion in Burnham, so in infantry. And I was exposed to many Māori, which you didn't get exposed to really in Christchurch at the time. The majority of my class was Māori. That's how I grew up.
Sure.
And a lot of young Māori came through into the infantry, and it gave them, if you spoke to them, I mean, they loved what it provided. And as, perhaps not surprisingly, my first boyfriend was a soldier, because I lived in that area. But, what the military gave you was structure and boundaries and accountability and connection and community. And what some of these people, these 10 boys will receive is that they'll receive what they probably wanted most of their lives, which is 3 square meals a day. They know where the food's coming from. They'll get a bed, and the same safe bed every night, and someone who's interested in them and what they're achieving every day and how they can get better.
Let's jump into quickly MP, excuse me, ex-Green MP Darleen Tana. She returned to Parliament amid migrant exploitation allegations involving her husband's business, which, by the way, is now in liquidation and owes hundreds of thousands of dollars. She appears defiant in responses of calls from her former party to resign. The last couple of days, she's been sitting with Te Pāti Māori. Rachel, what do you make of Darleen Tana?
It's a really extraordinary situation. And I think what is interesting from her, and I kind of think, gosh, would I take the same stance if I found myself in this position? Remember, that report didn't find her guilty necessarily of anything other than the Greens say misleading the party.
Right.
So, it didn't come out and say, right, we have uncovered this. There has been migrant abuse. Your hands are all over it. I mean, of course, there's more commentary that's coming out about what role she had to play, but she says it was my husband's business, and by association. There are also texts as well that they've revealed too. But if she stands down, it almost assumes guilt. And it's almost, and she hasn't really had what I would call a fair trial. So I understand why she's bedding in and perhaps thinks, right, I'll just see out this term and then I'll go. And, I earn a pretty good salary and I think I can do some work along the way, moving around the house. So I understand why she's doing what she's doing.
But how hard is it when when she's got no party? There's just her.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree with that.
She'll get nothing done.
She's being self-serving, totally. Yeah. But I think she's also putting the Greens under pressure to embarrass themselves on if they have to use the waka jumping legislation, something they have always vehemently opposed. If they have to use that to get rid of her, so she's probably smarting a bit, and I can understand how this predicament. How they found themselves in this position. But do we benefit as New Zealand taxpayers? No.
No.
And that's the real issue that I have is who are we funding and why.
Yeah, I mean, the Greens are very holier than thou about spending taxpayers' money and, always harping on about the government's, especially they've got a thing for landlords and, and tax rebates, whatever they... But you've got someone now sitting there on 168,000 a year roundabout. And, she what is she going to achieve? Yes, I get it. Maybe she is digging in. But, Darleen, I just think it's time to exit stage left. Sometimes you have to... What is it? Swallow a dead rat.